How am I supposed to write a resume for a federal job? Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and today I'm going to share a tiny hack that can make a huge difference when it comes time for you to apply for a federal job. You see, when you apply for a federal job through USAJOBs, you're going to see a document that is called a position description. And at first glance, it just looks like major duties, responsibilities, supervisory stuff, the kind of thing that you would see anywhere. But here's the secret. That position description was not written from scratch. It was written to comply with standards that are the same throughout the federal government. So an understanding of those standards can help us optimize our resume. Now, in an earlier video, I laid out the Office of Personnel Management's role and guidelines when it comes to writing a position description. And today, I'm going to show you how to reverse engineer those tools so that you can write your best resume. But before I do that, I got to recap. The Office of Personnel Management is the chief human resources agency for the entire federal government. OPM has a handbook that classifies federal jobs into groups and series. It's kind of like military occupational specialties. Each occupational group has its own manual that specifies how to describe the duties for all the series that are associated with that group. Every position description has 9 factors that have to be addressed inside the position description. Those are things like the knowledge that's necessary to perform the job and the conditions that the job will be done under. Each factor has a level that differentiates the level of difficulty associated with that factor. And then each factor and level combination has a number of points that are associated with it. And then if you total up all the points for all the factors, you can compare that sum to the grade conversion table in order to figure out what GS level this position description qualifies for. Now, let's put all that information to work writing our resume. The first thing that you're going to want to do is look at all of your work experience and determine what groups and series your experience most overlaps with. And while you're doing that, do not get tunnel vision on a single series. On one hand, your job experience is likely to overlap with more than one group or series. And here's a little secret that's important to understand. It is a lot easier for a federal civilian to move within their current series than it is for them to transition into another series. As a result of that, organizations have a tendency to try to minimize the number of different series that they have within their structure. And as different organizations do this, what will happen is 2 different organizations will describe very similar jobs using the language of different specialties. Okay, once you've identified the federal series that you have experience for, what you're going to want to do is go back through your work experience and rewrite your accomplishments in the language that's used for those series. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you use the language that hits the factors that contribute the most points. Those are typically knowledge and supervisory experience. And I want you to pay particular attention to the level that your work experience qualifies you for. One last thing to keep in mind as you crosswalk your experience into these federal standards is that some series may value similar experiences differently. Now, you've probably heard people say that you should customize your resume to the specific job you're applying for. And no place is this more relevant when you're applying for federal jobs that have different series. Okay, once you've gone through and you've crosswalked all your experience, then you can go onto USAJOBs and you can start building your custom resumes. But there is one more thing that you might want to take into consideration. Pay attention to the levels that your previous work experience aligns to. You see, civilians are hired and promoted based on their proven ability to operate at that higher level. And that is a really different way of thinking about things than the military, because in the military, you get promoted based off of your potential. You see the difference? Civilians have to prove they can operate at the next level, while military show potential to operate at the next level. So when you're writing your federal resume, you want to be proving that you have already performed work at the level that's being advertised. Next, it's important to know that applying for federal jobs it's a relatively long process. Every so often, I'll hear somebody who's getting close to retirement, then they'll say, I don't really know if I want to work as a civilian or a contractor. I guess I'll just start applying for civilian jobs when I get closer to retirement. My feeling is that is a bad idea. My advice is that if you're interested in federal jobs, then you should start applying for them the moment you get an inkling that you're going to retire. The whole point of the resume process is to get that first interview. And it is not uncommon for somebody to build their initial resume and just never clear the screening process to get to that interview. You want to make sure that if you do have some kind of administrative error in your resume that prevents you from getting to the interview, that you identify it, detect it, and correct it. And to do that, you have to start early. Of course, then people say, well, what if I get the interview and I just rock it and they want to hire me, but I have to tell them I'm not available for months? Well, first of all, that's the kind of problem you want to have. And then just be open and honest with the hiring panel. You're not going to be the first person who uses an interview as a live rehearsal for future job opportunities. And in some cases, the hiring panel appreciates an opportunity to get a good look at what the labor market looks like. More importantly, you might experience something that goes a little bit like this. You go to the interview, you do awesome, and then the hiring panel says, you would be the ideal candidate. We'd like to hire you, but we're looking for somebody sooner. So you shake hands, you go your separate ways, and the hiring panel offers the job to their number 2 pick. That person just turns them down. Then the hiring panel offers the job to their number 3 pick, and that person negotiates with them for months, and then finally turns them down. Then the hiring panel starts asking, I wonder whatever happened to that guy who was retiring in a couple months. All of a sudden, your timeline and their timeline line up. Now, you have stuck with me this far in the video, so I want to give you one last piece of advice that you might use or at least think about. If you're currently in the military, you probably have access to 4 structure documents that show you where the GS positions are. The organizations they're in, the locations, their occupational series, and their GS grades. If you have a specific location that you're interested in, you might use that information to figure out what kind of government occupational series are located there. If you have a particular series that you're interested in, you might use that information to figure out where there are concentrations of jobs that use that series. And either way, you can use those 4 structure documents to see what kind of upward mobility would exist for someone going into those specialties. You can see if there's some sort of promotional cap. Once you know the organizations that you might consider for future employment, you can use that information to start figuring out what is important to them. You might reach out to people who might be on the hiring panel so you understand the specific issues. Or you might start building relationships with people who currently work at that organization so that you understand the things they're working on and whether or not it would be a good fit for you. And all of these interactions can help you understand if there are upcoming vacancies. At the end of the day, we need the best people working on the nation's hardest problems, and The people who are able to navigate this bureaucracy to optimize their federal resume, well, we need people just like that. But the truth of it is that most people don't have access to this kind of information. And so it can place you at a significant advantage as you go through your job search. So in the meantime, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat. Follow me if you want to see more tips and tactics to navigate our nation's bureaucracy.